Welcome, chosen ones. They say, the truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. For a long time you carried a truth so sharp it could slice through the veils of deception they built around themselves. You walked silently with the wisdom they couldn't see, burning like a hidden flame while they stumbled in the dark, convinced you were lost. They mocked you, labeled you a dreamer, a conspiracy theorist, or worse, crazy. But reality doesn't care about labels. It just waits patiently. And now, that moment has arrived. The curtain is pulled back, and the truth stands naked, undeniable, and fierce. Ignorance is comfort's cowardly cousin, and many cling to it like it's a life jacket in a sinking ship. But the seas of reality show no mercy. The tides have turned, and now they're left gasping for clarity, choking on the very lies they once defended. Look around. Their faces tell the story better than any words could. The widened eyes, the nervous fidgeting, the forced politeness, all signs of recognition they can't suppress. Have we been blind this entire time? Their expressions seem to scream. The answer, yes. But here's the twist. While they were busy playing judge and jury in a court of illusions, you were writing the verdict with the pen of truth. They dismissed you like a plot line in a low-budget mystery, never realizing you were the author of the final chapter. And now, watching their realization unfold feels like front-row seats to the most satisfying show you never asked for. Irony hits like a freight train, doesn't it? It's not that they can't see the truth. It's that they refuse to see it until it slaps them in the face. Well, consider this the slap. You were the quiet force, the unyielding storm. They thought your silence was weakness. Turns out, it was strategy. And now, as they scramble to adjust, remember this. You were always 10 steps ahead. Welcome to the reckoning. Enjoy the show. They finally know. Chosen one, if you're ready, truly ready, to embrace the truth you've carried all along and step fully into your power, prove it. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share this message with someone still trapped in the fog of denial. Comment 77 below if you're done shrinking, done staying silent while knowing what others can't see, and ready to rise into your destiny. The truth has been waiting. Are you bold enough to answer the call? Let's begin. Number 1. Seeing beyond the veil. When the truth makes you the outsider. They say, it's dangerous to be right when the world is wrong. Walking in truth is not just lonely. It's a battle against the comfortable lies others refuse to abandon. You see the cracks in the facade long before the walls crumble, but being ahead of your time doesn't earn you praise. It isolates you. They can't understand you because their vision is limited by what feels safe, familiar, and easy to accept. When you speak up, your words sound foreign, not because they're untrue, but because they shatter illusions they've spent their lives defending. It's easier to label you crazy than admit they've been blind. You're a living contradiction to the security they cling to. They see you, but they can't comprehend you. Denial is more than ignorance. It's a survival mechanism. People would rather cling to a lie that feels safe than face a truth that demands change. The unknown terrifies them because truth doesn't just inform, it transforms. People don't fear the truth. They fear being unprepared for what the truth demands. You've felt it, the sting of being laughed at, dismissed, even condemned for knowing what others couldn't grasp. They called you paranoid, delusional, a dreamer, but reality doesn't wait for permission to unfold. The truth stays constant, unaffected by opinions, ready to reveal itself when its time comes. And when that moment arrives, It hits them like a storm they never saw coming. They'll feel the crushing weight of realization, not just for being wrong, but for refusing to listen. The shame isn't in their ignorance, it's in how fiercely they fought to stay blind. They mocked what they didn't understand because accepting it would mean admitting their entire worldview was built on shifting sand. But here's the secret they'll never admit. A part of them always knew. They felt the tug of truth in your words, but buried it under comfort and denial. Now, as they scramble to rewrite the past, pretending they always had a feeling, they can't escape the memory of how hard they fought against you. The hardest part of seeing beyond the veil isn't the rejection. It's knowing you were never waiting for their approval. You were waiting for them to wake up. And now, as reality crashes in, they can't deny what they always feared. You were right. They just couldn't face it until now. Number 2. The loudest voice is often silent. They say, "Still waters run deep." In a world obsessed with noise, there's something dangerously powerful about someone who chooses silence, not out of ignorance, but out of understanding. While others scramble for attention, shouting half-truths to be heard, you stood still, not because you couldn't speak, but because you didn't need to. The truth never begs for recognition. It simply waits to be revealed. You've watched the world fall into chaos, loud voices clashing like thunder, desperate to dominate the conversation, but you never joined the frenzy. You understood that real power isn't in being the loudest. It's in knowing when words aren't necessary. Wisdom isn't about winning arguments. It's about understanding that time always exposes the truth. Your silence has been your strongest weapon, though they never saw it that way. Why aren't you speaking up? They wondered, mistaking your calm for weakness. They thought your refusal to engage meant you were powerless, but they couldn't have been more wrong. Silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. While they burned themselves out trying to be right, you stayed grounded, knowing that truth doesn't require validation to exist. In a world addicted to noise, your stillness was threatening. It forced them to sit with their insecurities, without distractions, without applause. Your quiet presence felt like a challenge they couldn't solve, a riddle with no clear answer. And people fear what they can't explain. They laughed at your patience, assuming you were passive. They mistook your waiting for indifference. But they never understood that you weren't waiting for approval. You were waiting for the inevitable. The truth doesn't rush. It arrives precisely when it's meant to. And now, as reality crashes down like a relentless wave, they see the cracks in the false foundations they built. Suddenly, your silence feels deafening, its meaning clear, undeniable. What cuts them deepest isn't just that you were right, it's that you never needed their acknowledgement. While they wasted energy chasing validation, you let time do the talking. They're left haunted by their arrogance, replaying every moment they dismissed you as irrelevant or unimportant. They realize now that your silence wasn't emptiness, it was power. You were the eye of the storm, unmoved by the chaos swirling around you. Never mistake stillness for weakness or patience for passivity. You were always ahead, not because of luck, but because of clarity, foresight, and silent confidence. And now, as they stand in the ruins of their shattered certainty, they can't escape one lingering regret. If only we'd listened to the quiet one, maybe we wouldn't feel so lost. Number 3. From mockery to desperation, when they seek what they once scorned. First, they ignore you. Then, they laugh at you. Then, they fight you. And then, they ask you for answers. The irony is as sharp as it is cruel. The very people who dismissed your wisdom, mocked your insights, and treated your clarity as folly, now find themselves circling back, not with apologies, but with questions. The knowledge they once rejected has become their lifeline, their last hope. It's almost comical at first. You watch the shift, the confidence in their ridicule dissolving into a hesitant, almost nervous curiosity. But beneath their words lies something deeper. Their rejection of your truth was never about logic. It wasn't that your insights were flawed. It was that accepting them would have shattered their fragile egos. To see your clarity for what it was would have required a humility they couldn't summon. Their mockery wasn't about proving you wrong. It was about preserving their pride. It was easier to laugh, to belittle, to dismiss, than to admit they were blind while you saw with precision. They couldn't fathom how someone they underestimated could be light years ahead, so they buried their discomfort under layers of condescension. But time is the ultimate equalizer. Reality doesn't cater to opinions or egos. It simply reveals itself. And now, as the truth stands undeniable, they're left staring at the wreckage of their own arrogance. The realization hits hard. Every scoff, every sneer, every brush-off was time wasted, time they could have spent learning, growing, and preparing. Now, regret gnaws at their insides, a bitter reminder of the cost of denial. When they finally approach you, it's never with the raw honesty you deserve. They won't say, "I was wrong, you were right." That would require a vulnerability they still can't muster. Instead, they ask careful, casual questions, masking their desperation with forced nonchalance. But their eyes betray them, their hesitance, their faltering tone. It's a silent confession they can't fully hide. You don't need their words to know the truth. Their actions speak louder than any apology could. They finally see that your knowledge wasn't luck or guesswork. It was understanding, foresight, and clarity they lacked. And now they're leaning on the wisdom they once dismissed, hoping to piece together the fragments of what they broke. But here's the truth they'll never understand. You were never angry at their rejection. You didn't need their validation then, and you don't need it now. The truth is self-sufficient. Watching them scramble now isn't about vindication, it's bittersweet. You never sought to be proven right. You simply wanted them to understand before it was too late. And so, as they come to you, humbled by their delayed realization, you remain steady, unshaken. Their doubt was never your burden to bear. It was their lesson to learn. Now, as they finally begin to grasp the truth, you offer your knowledge freely, knowing that your strength was never in convincing them. It was in waiting, ready to guide them when they were ready to listen. Number 4, the curse of knowing, seeing what they fear to face. To see is to know, and to know is to suffer. Carrying the burden of foresight isn't power, it's isolation. The ability to see what others can't, to predict what lies ahead with piercing clarity, doesn't elevate you. It alienates you. It's not a blessing, it's a curse disguised as insight, a lonely road where understanding is both your gift and your prison. While others find comfort in illusions and convenient lies, you see through them like shattered glass. The world operates on surface-level thinking, driven by half-truths and shallow motives. You recognize patterns before they form, predict outcomes before anyone even realizes there's a game being played. But instead of admiration, your clarity makes you dangerous, because truth unsettles those addicted to false security. They don't reject you because you're wrong. They reject you because you're right too soon. The truths you hold aren't comforting or easy. They're sharp-edged and undeniable, the kind of truths that strip away the comfort of ignorance. Accepting your perspective would mean tearing down everything they've built their lives around. And, for most, that's far too great a price to pay. So they resist. They dismiss you as paranoid, dramatic, or delusional, not because your words lack substance, but because accepting them would force them into a reality they're not ready to face. Denial is their sanctuary. Knowledge is your curse. You learn quickly that sharing your truth is a battle you can't win. Their eyes glaze over, their expressions harden, and their responses drip with condescension. You're overthinking it. Stop being so negative. They cling to their illusions like lifeboats in a storm, while you stand at the shore, already seeing the wreckage ahead. So, you stop trying. You carry the weight in silence, watching events unfold exactly as you predicted, helpless to change anything. You become the quiet observer, resigned to witnessing the inevitable, knowing that no warning can prevent what people refuse to see. And when the day of reckoning finally comes, when reality slams into them like a runaway train, it's not satisfying. It's not vindication or victory. It's heartbreak. Because being right doesn't undo the loneliness you felt while carrying that burden alone. It doesn't erase the sleepless nights spent haunted by what you knew was coming. The cruelest part? Even when they finally see, they won't acknowledge how much you endured. They'll be consumed by their own shock, regret, and shame. They'll forget that while they're just now waking up to the harsh truth, you've lived with it for far longer, enduring the isolation, the rejection, the silent ache of knowing it didn't have to end this way. The curse of seeing clearly isn't knowing the future. It's knowing it while being powerless to change it. The burden isn't the knowledge itself. It's watching people suffer through what could have been avoided, if only they'd listened. Number 5. Checkmate. While they played checkers, you mastered chess. In strategy, it's not about moving fast, it's about moving smart. While they rushed through life like reckless players in a game of checkers, chasing instant gratification and easy wins, you were playing a different game entirely. Every move you made was calculated, deliberate, and purposeful, not for the moment, but for the end game. To them, life was a series of quick plays. Jump here, grab that, celebrate now. They lived for the thrill of immediate rewards, blinded by the rush of small, temporary victories. They mistook speed for success, confusing motion with progress. They couldn't see beyond the next move, trapped in a cycle of impulsiveness, fueled by arrogance and desperation for recognition. But while they scrambled for meaningless wins, you saw the entire board. You understood that true power isn't found in flashy moves. It's built through careful strategy. You didn't chase recognition. You didn't play to impress. Every action you took was part of a larger plan they couldn't even begin to comprehend. They thought they were winning because they moved fast. But in reality, they were running in circles, unaware they were being cornered by their own short-sightedness. While they celebrated hollow victories, you quietly advanced, playing the long game, one calculated move at a time. Patience isn't passivity, it's precision. They never realized that every impulsive decision they made was sealing their fate. They played recklessly, thinking they were ahead, but you anticipated every mistake long before they made it. You didn't react. You strategized. You didn't panic. You prepared. You knew that winning isn't about being the loudest. It's about being the smartest. And now the board is set and the game is over. Checkmate. They find themselves trapped, boxed in by consequences they can't escape, scrambling for an exit that doesn't exist. Their downfall isn't just about losing. It's about realizing they never even understood the game you were playing. They thought your patience was hesitation, your quiet moves a sign of weakness. They were wrong. The bitter truth they now face is that their arrogance was their undoing. They believed they were competing with you, but you were always several moves ahead. You never needed to expose their mistakes. Their reckless ambition did it for you. And while they're left grappling with the consequences of their failures, trying to rebuild from the ashes of their own impulsiveness, you've already moved on. You've conquered the game they never realized they were playing. It's not just that they lost, it's that they never even stood a chance. Number 6. The heavy crown of knowing, the painful gift of foresight. Knowing too much is a curse disguised as wisdom. Foresight isn't the magical ability people imagine. It's a relentless, exhausting burden. Seeing what others can't doesn't make you feel powerful. It makes you feel helpless. You watch life unfold like a story you've already read, knowing the plot twists, the mistakes, the inevitable consequences, yet powerless to rewrite the ending. You see the warnings etched in every decision, the cracks forming long before anyone notices. You try to speak up, offering insight, trying to steer them away from the edge, but your words fall on deaf ears. They dismiss you as paranoid, negative, or dramatic. Your concerns threaten the fragile illusions they've built, making rejection their easiest escape. Ignorance feels like freedom until reality arrives. It's not that they can't believe you, it's that they won't. Accepting your foresight means admitting that their world is built on shifting sand, that they aren't as in control as they pretend to be. It means facing truths too uncomfortable to bear. And so, they shut you out, not because you're wrong, but because you're too right, too soon. The worst part of foresight isn't seeing disaster coming, it's knowing you could have prevented it. You see the wreckage before it happens, the heartaches, the losses, the missed chances, and you carry that knowledge in silence. It's like standing outside a burning house, holding a bucket of water, only to be told, there's no fire. And then the inevitable happens. Reality crashes in, proving you right in ways you never wanted. But when they finally realize you were right, it's not satisfying. It's bittersweet. There's no joy in being validated when the damage is already done. You were right can't erase the sleepless nights you spent seeing what they couldn't. What they'll never understand is that foresight comes with scars. You've already lived through the emotional fallout they're just beginning to face. You grieved the losses, felt the weight of missed opportunities, and mourned futures that could have been saved, long before they even realized what was at stake. Now, as they stumble through regret and shattered illusions, they're overwhelmed, scrambling for solutions they should have embraced long ago. They've only just begun feeling the sting of loss, while you've carried that ache for far longer, alone, unseen, unheard. The cruelest irony, you weren't just ahead of them in knowledge, you were ahead of them in grief. You processed the heartbreak of what could have been while they were still living in blissful ignorance. And now, they face a reality they never prepared for, while you quietly move forward, already knowing how this chapter ends. Foresight isn't a gift, it's responsibility without control. It's knowing what could be saved, but being powerless to stop the fall. And even now, as they awaken to the harsh truths you always saw, you understand something they never will. The burden of seeing isn't just knowing what's coming, it's carrying that knowledge long before anyone else is ready to believe. Number 7. When pride battles. Truth. Pride makes us artificial, humility makes us real. The truth was never the problem, it was you. The clarity, the foresight, the undeniable facts you brought to the table weren't flawed or lacking. They were simply delivered by someone they couldn't accept being right. Their ego wouldn't allow it. To admit you were right wasn't just about acknowledging the truth. It was about admitting they were wrong, and for them, that price was far too steep. It wasn't just the information you offered, it was who it came from. In their eyes, accepting your perspective meant surrendering their sense of superiority. They couldn't reconcile the idea that someone they underestimated, someone they belittled, could hold a sharper understanding than they ever could. For them, it wasn't a matter of logic or evidence, it was about control. To listen to you meant losing face. Your insights weren't just challenges to their beliefs, they were challenges to their pride. And so they rejected the truth, not because they didn't see it, but because they couldn't bear the thought of you being the one to deliver it. Their arrogance became their armor, a fragile defense against the nagging possibility that they had misjudged you. It was easier to mock, dismiss, and discredit than to confront the unsettling reality that you were steps ahead. Pride blinds us to the truths we most need to see. But pride is no match for time. Reality is relentless. It doesn't yield to ego or arrogance. The truth they fought so desperately to ignore now stands unshaken, undeniable, and irrefutable. And with it comes the harsh realization that their pride wasn't strength, it was their greatest weakness. The hardest part for them isn't just admitting they were wrong, it's admitting they were wrong about you. They built a fortress of superiority around themselves, thinking it would protect their sense of control. Now, that fortress lies in ruins, leaving them exposed and painfully aware of how much they lost by refusing to listen. And where are you? Exactly where you've always been, steady, grounded, and unmoved. You never sought their validation. Their approval was never your goal. That's what stings them most. They can't rewrite the narrative to paint you as someone desperate for recognition, because you never were. The bitterest truth they now face is that their ego, not you, was always the enemy. It wasn't your insights they feared. It was what those insights revealed about themselves. They pushed you away, mocked your wisdom, and ignored your warnings, not because they doubted your truth, but because they couldn't bear the thought of you being right all along. Now, as they wrestle with the aftermath of their arrogance, they're left with the cost of their pride, a cost far greater than they ever anticipated. And you remain untouched, unchanged, watching as they finally learn the lesson you understood all along. The truth doesn't care about pride. It stands firm, waiting for the moment they're ready to face it. Number 8. When the illusion crumbles. The higher they build their walls, the harder they fall. For so long they wore their confidence like armor, strutting through life as though they were invincible, untouchable. They looked down on you, dismissing your calm as weakness, your humility as a lack of ambition. In their eyes, their loud boasts and constant comparisons were proof they were always ahead, always winning. But now, the mirage has shattered. The pedestal they built themselves on has crumbled, revealing the fragile truth they tried to hide. What they thought was power was nothing more than an illusion, a shallow construction propped up by insecurity. They paraded their so-called successes, measured themselves against you, and convinced themselves they were always one step ahead. The truth? They were never ahead. They were running in place, trapped in their own need for validation. And time? Time has exposed it all. The very confidence they flaunted was built on a foundation of fear and fragile pride. What they mistook for your weakness was actually the quiet strength that allowed you to rise while they were stuck chasing empty victories. You were never competing with them because you weren't playing their game. They focused on the surface, on the applause, the recognition, the fleeting wins. You, on the other hand, stayed focused on real progress. While they ran circles around superficial goals, You built something solid, something real, something that could stand the test of time. Now, reality has caught up with them. They stand still, stunned, faced with the undeniable truth that they were never ahead. They weren't even on the same path. As they scrambled for recognition, you quietly and consistently advanced. Out of sight, yes, but always moving forward, always building something they couldn't touch. The harshest realization. It's not just that they were wrong, it's that they now see how obvious it was all along. Their arrogance blinded them to the truth they couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. They built their sense of superiority on a house of cards, dismissing you not because you were weak, but because they were too proud to admit that you saw something they didn't. The hardest pill for them to swallow is that you never needed to tear them down. Their own insecurities did it for you. While they were busy attacking you, trying to prove their dominance, their pride and their desperation led them straight to their own downfall. They self-destructed, driven by their own arrogance, and you never had to lift a finger. And now, stripped of their illusions, they face an uncomfortable truth. The person they underestimated, the one they saw as beneath them, was never behind. You were always miles ahead. The distance between you wasn't just time, it was clarity, purpose, and quiet strength. And as they stand in the wreckage of their false superiority, you remain untouched, steady, and more powerful than ever. The game was never about appearances, it was always about the lasting impact of real growth. And now, they're left with nothing but the bitter aftertaste of a mirage that no longer holds up. Number 9. The cost of being right. Sometimes being right doesn't feel like victory, it feels like survival. There's a strange kind of satisfaction that comes with being proven right, especially after years of being dismissed, mocked, or ignored. The truth you carried for so long, the insight that others scoffed at, now stands undeniable. But even in that moment of vindication, there's no real sense of triumph. Instead, it's a sharp, bittersweet sting that cuts deeper than you could have ever anticipated. When they finally see what you saw all along, the change is almost palpable. Their faces shift, surprise, regret, and the unmistakable flicker of shame flashing across their expressions. Apologies follow, but they're awkward, forced, as if they can't quite grasp how to admit they were wrong without losing face. The compliments they now offer feel more like afterthoughts, like weak attempts to cover up how blind they were. I always knew you had it in you. It stings, doesn't it? Because the truth was always there, but they refused to see it until they had no choice. But by the time they finally admit you were right, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels hollow. The damage has been done. The time wasted, the missed opportunities, the mistakes they made that could have been avoided if only they'd listened sooner. All of it lingers in the air like smoke from a fire that's long since burned out. What makes it so unsatisfying is that their realization comes too late. You've moved on. You stopped needing their validation long ago. You've carried your own truth in silence for so long that now, when they finally come around, it feels like a hollow echo, a recognition they were forced into, not one that was earned through mutual understanding. And that's the worst part, the part that cuts deep. They didn't reject you because you were wrong. They rejected you because they couldn't handle the truth when it came from you. It was never about facts or logic. It was about their ego, their refusal to admit that someone they once dismissed could be right, that someone they thought they could ignore could see the truth they were blind to. The hardest part of this vindication isn't the truth finally being seen. It's knowing that you tried to help. You tried to warn them, to offer clarity, to prevent the consequences that were always coming. You didn't offer your wisdom for recognition. You offered it because you cared, because you could see what they couldn't. And yet their arrogance, their pride, kept them from listening. Now, as they scramble to pick up the pieces, you stand there, calm, steady, and not gloating, not bitter, but exhausted. You've already mourned the losses. You've grieved the opportunities they let slip away. They're only feeling the weight of it now, but you've carried that weight for so much longer. Their regret is fresh, overwhelming and raw, but it's just a shadow of what you've been living with all this time. Their apologies, their sudden interest in your wisdom, it's all an afterthought. They only see now because the comfort they held so tightly to has shattered. Vindication should feel sweet, but it's tainted by the price you paid. Isolation, rejection, and the suffocating loneliness of carrying the truth while everyone else stayed blind. You were right all along, but at a cost they'll never truly understand. And in the end, that's what makes your quiet victory far more profound than any recognition could ever be. Number 10. The fear was never about you. It was about them. The truth they couldn't face wasn't about the facts. It was about what you represented. You weren't just offering knowledge. You were a mirror, reflecting the uncomfortable truths they refused to see about themselves. Your clarity forced them to confront their insecurities and the illusions they clung to. It wasn't that they didn't understand. It was that they feared what accepting it meant. Listening to you would have meant challenging their identity, their carefully constructed world. Your presence alone disrupted their sense of control, threatening their fragile stability. This wasn't about logic, it was self-preservation. They resisted you because admitting you were right would have forced them to change, to face the lies they lived by, and to take responsibility for their choices. Their rejection wasn't ignorance, it was fear. You didn't need to argue. You simply existed, and your unwavering truth made it impossible for them to ignore forever. Now, stripped of their illusions, they finally see that their fear was never about you. It was about confronting the truth about themselves. In the end, they weren't running from you. They were running from their own fear of being wrong. And now, reality has caught up with them. Number 11. The true cost of truth. The truth you carried was never a gift. It was a heavy, suffocating burden. It wasn't a choice, but a curse that anchored you to a reality no one else could bear. While they reveled in their comforting lies, you were left alone in the storm of what was to come. You didn't just know the truth, you lived it, feeling its sharp edges tear at you long before it came crashing into their world. They mocked your caution, brushed aside your warnings, and labeled you too intense or too much. To them, their ignorance was freedom, a blissful escape from the harshness you had to endure. Your clarity was a dagger to their fragile sense of security, and they avoided it like the plague. While they pretended their world was fine, you saw the cracks. You saw the disaster coming, but you couldn't stop it. The isolation you faced wasn't just physical, it was a constant emotional battle. While they followed the easy path, you carried the weight of truth, questioning when they refused to. You stood firm when they wavered, spoke up when they stayed silent, and in return, you were left alone, ridiculed, and misunderstood. The truth is never easy, and it often comes with a cost. What's hardest to accept is that you didn't choose to see it. You were forced to. Your foresight wasn't a gift, it was a curse. A curse that made you watch, powerless, as everyone else walked toward their downfall, blind to the inevitable. Now that they're scrambling to recover, you stand, exhausted, already mourning the losses that could have been avoided. And when they finally realize the cost of their ignorance, it's too late. They will never fully understand the price of truth. the price you've been paying all along. Number 12. Once seen, never unseen. It's like walking through a fog, only to have it suddenly lift, revealing a vast, jagged landscape you never expected. The moment the veil of illusion falls, there's no going back. The truth, once seen, becomes an undeniable force, one that can never be unseen. And now, that's what they're struggling with. Not just the brutal weight of what's been revealed, but the agonizing loss of the comfort they once had. For so long, they held on to the illusion that everything was fine, that their world was secure. But now, the cracks are exposed, the fragile foundation shattered. They can't go back to pretending it was all okay. The truth has irreversibly shifted their perception of reality, and every moment of blissful ignorance they once knew feels like a distant memory they can never reclaim. It's a form of imprisonment. They are trapped in a reality they can no longer ignore, forced to face what they were so desperate to avoid. The painful part. They'll never be able to forget what they now know. The truth has a way of lingering, and once it's in your mind, there's no escaping it. So, chosen one, the journey you've been on, seeing what others couldn't, speaking truths that made you an outsider, and bearing the heavy burden of knowledge, was never easy. You've stood alone, faced ridicule, and endured rejection. But here's the undeniable truth. You were right all along. The world couldn't see it then, but now the veil has lifted, and those who dismissed you are now forced to confront the reality they never wanted to face. Truth is never easy. It doesn't offer comfort or validation. It doesn't bend to ego or pride, but it stands firm, and it always reveals itself. The hardest part is knowing that while others resisted, you carried the weight of the truth. You felt it, lived it, and survived it, while they clung to illusions. As they grapple with their own awakening, remember this: you never needed their approval. You've always been the one who stood steady, unmoved by the noise around you. Your strength isn't in proving them wrong. It's in your unwavering belief in what you knew was right, even when no one else saw it. So now, what's next? If you're done waiting for others to catch up, if you're ready to stop playing small and rise into your power, it's time to take action. The world may not always understand your clarity, but that doesn't mean you should stop sharing it. If you're ready to step into your truth and embrace the power of knowing who you truly are, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below with "I'm ready" if you're prepared to stop waiting and start rising. Let's continue this journey together. The truth is waiting. Are you bold enough to face it?